took you so long?
Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Menace, came out in 2015, which means...
I'm afraid it's been 9 years. Damn it!
As some of you may know, a certain other game I kinda like also came out that year, so while I did buy this game because of the hype and spent some time playing it back then, I was never able to finish it while it was still relevant. I'm not sure what it is that made me pick this game back up in 2024. Maybe it's because I keep having ideas for videos, then procrastinating those ideas with new ideas, and I'm on like 5 layers of procrastination now. But fairly soon after I started playing this game again, I realized I wanted to talk about it. Metal Gear Solid 5 truly is a collection of extremes the way only a game directed by Hideo Kojima can be. Over-the-top characters and bosses created by Kojima, weird esoteric plot digressions written by Kojima, uncomfortably long horny cutscenes directed by Kojima. Did I mention Hideo Kojima worked on this game? Oh, okay, good, because this game really wants you to know he was involved. Every mission starts and ends with the guy's name being plastered all over the screen. He actually even put himself in the game with an ad for his glasses. My god. Now I know I'm not the first person to make this observation, but that kinda leads me to one of the elephants in the room when it comes to this game. It's actually not 100% finished because of Konami basically dicking Kojima and ousting him from the company.
Mr. Kojima had every intention of being with us tonight. But unfortunately, he was informed by a lawyer representing Konami just recently that he would not be allowed to travel to tonight's awards ceremony to accept any awards.
Allegedly. I'm not going to go in depth into this drama, but I mean, just look at where Konami is now versus where Kojima is, and that'll tell you everything you need to know. Kojima is releasing bangers with people constantly hyped for what he has in store next, while Konami is re-releasing games from back when they cared, and I don't know, mobile games? Who cares? It is and always will be, fuck Konami. Until they apologize or something, I don't know. While I'm talking about Kojima though, I think it's actually important to point out, while he probably has the most to do with the Metal Gear franchise in terms of impact he individually has had on the games, video games this size are not the result of one person's efforts. They're actually made by massive teams of really talented individuals. So after doing the obligatory Kojima shout out, I now want to take a moment and give some credit to someone who I consider to be one of the unsung heroes of the Metal Gear series, Yoji Shinkawa. He's been the guy in charge of character and mech design since Metal Gear Solid in 1998. Obviously in any game series, the person designing characters is a super important role, but anyone who's ever played a Metal Gear game, or even if you've just seen gameplay or screenshots, you know just how important the aesthetic and the iconic look of the characters is to this series. Going all the way back to 1998, and looking at some of the designs he was able to pull off for hardware that made most people look like this, was nothing short of a miracle. And this talent he had for designing memorable and downright beautiful characters and mechs is something that has elevated the series all the way up to 2015 with the Phantom Pain. Without the talents of Yoji Shinkawa, I don't think Metal Gear is nearly as successful of a franchise, and I just wanted to take a moment to give him his flowers. If you ever feel like doing a deep dive into some jaw-dropping works of art, just look through some of his pieces of concept art or any of his original work. There's a video of him doing a live painting, and watching his technique is mesmerizing even to someone like me who knows nothing about painting. I'll link it in the description. Now, after glazing up the people who worked on this game like a true fanboy, I'm gonna flush all that credibility I just got from any Metal Gear fans watching right down the toilet and drop this grenade in your lap. This is actually the first and only Metal Gear game I've ever played. Well, it was at least. I've since played a little bit of the original MGS because I bought the Master Collection, but feel free to let that affect how you receive anything I say from this point on. So now, with my credibility sufficiently shaken, let's get into the topic at hand and talk about this game, shall we? I want to start with the gameplay because it's something I think deserves to be talked about way more than it is now. The Phantom Pain feels as good as any other game I've ever played. Everything feels so polished and smooth, except for walking up ledges for some reason, which is really important in a stealth game. Where action games sometimes can get a pass when the controls aren't perfect, because it doesn't really matter your exact positioning when you're just picking off nameless bad man number 1046. In a stealth game, when you can't let that same bad man spot you because you're going for a total stealth run, being in that exact square foot between the dumpster and the building, or under a specific table really matters, and the devs clearly focused a significant amount of time to making Venom Snake feel perfect to control. They also really knocked the enemy AI out of the park, for a game that came out nearly a decade ago especially. There are games coming out today with enemies that aren't even close to this level of sophistication. The way they adapt to your playstyle and what gear you tend to use really keeps the levels feeling fresh, where it definitely could have gotten stale without it. This, in addition to the sheer number of tools at your disposal, makes the game really fun and satisfying to play. I don't know if I'm allowed to call it an immersive sim, but with the amount of freedom you have to approach missions and side ops however you want, I think it fits. Like, I'm typically not a stealth guy when it comes to video games. I'm usually just too impatient, and the blow everyone up option just starts talking to me like the Green Goblin's mask.
What do I do?
You will need to beat a level where you are outnumbered.
But how?
Unless you can be patient, there's only one way it can be done.
Tell me how!
Just fucking blow everyone up with explosives.
I was worried about being forced to be stealthy with this game when I first started playing it, but to my surprise, there are so many times where you can absolutely take the blow everyone up path. You can literally spawn in with a tank, for God's sake. It's practically encouraged at times. After being given so many options and developing so many tools designed for stealth though, I started to get curious. I wanted to see what the big deal was with stealth, and let me tell you guys, I think I might have that sneaky deaky dog in me.
Boss, you've entered a building. Always keep an escape route in. That's the target.
Whew. That made me feel cool as shit.
Mission complete, and how? They're gonna tell stories about this one, boss.
Let's fucking go! I feel like this game's biggest strength is the way it gives you so much freedom in how you want to approach any given mission. Where most games design a path for the player and set up roadblocks along the way, this game creates these intricate fortresses with living, thinking inhabitants, and gives you so many tools that I can guarantee even they didn't think of a lot of the ways players would finish these levels. But me personally, because I'm not creative in the slightest, I would usually just stay far away, have Quiet ping all the enemies she could, then I would try to ping the rest, slowly go in wherever there was the least amount of resistance, try to pick them off one by one with my trank, then Fulton them out so they wouldn't get discovered by other guards. Inevitably end up getting spotted, and either shoot my way out or just hide until they decided they were done looking for me. Most of the time though, if you're spending a really long time on a mission, and you just keep failing and it feels impossible, there's some sort of weapon, item, buddy ability, or something that you're forgetting about that would make the mission a lot easier. The game can really be as easy or as difficult as you want depending on what limitations you decide to set for yourself. Like for me, once I saw the light, I started every mission with the goal of going non-lethal, being as stealthy as possible, not calling in any aerial assistance, or using anything that would limit me to below an S rank. But, because that became my default way of doing things, the game's adaptive difficulty started to force me into different playstyles. See, this game actually changes enemy gear and strategies depending on how you've completed previous missions. Like, because I relied so much on my trank sidearm, enemies started wearing helmets to avoid headshots. This meant I couldn't insta-down them from behind, and it also meant that I couldn't have Quiet snipe them anymore, because she goes for headshots. Meaning, after she would scout an area, she sort of became useless to my strategy. Not to say knowing exact enemy locations was useless, but basically after that, all she did was hum in my ear, which I'm not gonna lie gets old pretty fast. Forcing me out of my comfort zone at first would frustrate me, as I would just repeatedly slam my head into the wall not thinking of solutions. Who?
Mission failed, boss.
Yeah, no shit, thanks. You fucking bitch.
Take it out.
Please select a strike point. Strike requested.
But what I didn't realize was that frustration is a feature, not a bug. Like, if it wasn't for that adaptive difficulty, I would have ignored a lot of the items in this game. You can't approach missions in the Phantom Pain with From Software brain. There are no builds, and you can't just get so good with one weapon that it'll take you through the whole game. Adapting on the fly and remembering all the different tools the game has given you is part of the gameplay. To all my fellow FromSofters watching though, you guys are good at learning from your mistakes, so I know you can figure it out. Stealth games can be sort of hard to review because it all depends on how much you as a player would enjoy the waiting around and observing required for that kind of gameplay. But as someone who went in expecting to suffer through that aspect of the game, I can firmly say that I had a lot of fun with this game. And if you're the type of person who thinks you wouldn't like that sort of thing, I'd urge you to maybe borrow a copy of this game from a friend and give it a shot and see what you think. You may be surprised. When we're talking purely about the missions of this game, I have almost no complaints gameplay wise. When you're tasked with infiltrating a base, doing that is one of the most enjoyable experiences I've had recently in gaming. Unfortunately, there is another aspect of the gameplay I haven't mentioned yet, because it's such a mess. And that would be the open world. Basically what they decided to do for the Phantom Pain was they took the way they usually design levels, then sprinkled them around on an open map, and allowed you to travel between them freely. Not reinventing the wheel or anything, plenty of games have done open worlds. The problem here is that literally the only thing to do in the open world is travel to another outpost to do another mission or side op. The open world of the Phantom Pain is so barren and empty, I really just wonder why they even bothered to include it in the first place. I don't know if it has to do with Konami trying to sabotage the project because they were tired of Kojima, and maybe it would have been better if it had more time in the oven, or if they really just genuinely didn't have any ideas for the open world. But regardless of why it sucks, the point is that it does. Something I feel may have contributed to them adding an open world to this game, even though it felt underdeveloped and underutilized, is that there's this sort of mind virus that crept its way into the gaming industry and gamers at large, that open world equals better. I mean, even the term open world is this buzzword that gets thrown around so much in marketing that it's hard to even articulate really what it means anymore. To most people, it means a map that'll allow you to travel from A to B in any way you choose and whenever you want, while being able to ignore the main story and follow it at your own pace. But like, you can do that in Dark Souls, and yet Elden Ring gets to call itself the open world Dark Souls. Resident Evil 4 allows you to do side quests, and has sections where you explore parts of the map and find secret items non-linearly and whenever you want, but we don't call it an open world game. So what makes those games different? Well, to most people it's the size of the map and how it's laid out. Has the map been designed carefully by the devs to be really dense but smaller, or is there a large area with little dots on it where the levels are? I'm going to take a moment here to point out that one of these ways of designing games is not better than the other. There are just different types of games that suit different styles of map and level design. I'm sure a ton of people watching would list Skyrim, GTA 5, The Witcher 3, and other open world games as some of their favorites of all time, and I love those games as well. But why isn't Metal Gear Solid 5 up there with those? Sure, there are people who love it and even say it's their favorite ever, but it's never in the GOAT conversations like those other ones are. And in my opinion, the decision to make the map an open world actually has a lot to do with that. Like, let's look at what could have been had they decided against making this an open world game, and had instead just designed the game level by level. Well, right off the bat, something I think of is how much more diverse the locations could have been in this game. A lot of this game's story revolves around how Metal Gear and nuclear weapons could destroy the whole world if word got out that they were being developed. But we never get to see anything outside of Afghanistan, Africa, or Mother Base. This could have felt like a true globe-trotting adventure, as you chase Skullface and other entities developing weapons of mass destruction, infiltrating their outposts in every continent, as you try to keep this all under wraps and keep the entire world from devolving into a state of panic. To me, having missions and cutscenes happening in Asia, Europe, North and South America would have made the story feel more significant, as we would see just how widespread the problem was, rather than just hearing about it. But that's all just head in the clouds fantasy, and I'm not designing video games, so what do I know? Well, something I do know is, after a while the settings in this game get pretty boring because they all kind of look the same. Aside from Africa having more grass and trees, and Afghanistan just being a desert, after playing the game, the places that stick out in my memory are ones like the mansion, the jungle, this encampment with all the caves in it, all levels that were intricately crafted and had artists putting tons of thought into creating, rather than the 200 identical outposts with guards and a few rooms with materials in them, or the empty wasteland in between. So what's my solution to make this game work optimally? Well, despite what some of you may be thinking, I don't actually think it's just to completely remove the freedom of choosing drop points and being able to move through an open world area to get to the objective. While they could literally just remove all open world elements and make all the outposts and missions selectable from a menu, and I think that would genuinely make the game better, they clearly designed this game with the open world elements in mind, and I think they could have pulled it off. The most optimal solution, in my opinion, is more of a middle ground. You see, I actually did like when I would stumble across an outpost and had to use my brain to figure a way through. The problem is, after that started getting repetitive, my brain would often decide the best thing to do was request pickup from the nearest drop point, then just redeploy wherever the next mission was. I think the way you fix that is first you take the 2 maps you have now, take the interesting parts of the map and enemy bases, and squish them into maps like a quarter of the size. Now you've got 2 really fun maps to explore, but the problem is there's a huge chunk of the game you just removed. And my answer to that is to make a couple more really dense, fun maps to explore in different parts of the world. Use your imagination. We've got a jungle map and a desert map. You could have a snow map, an urban or industrial map, maybe like an abandoned neighborhood where the enemy is secretly developing weapons where they think no one's looking, right under their nose. Now we have these smaller but more dense areas where players are encouraged to explore for no other reason than it's actually fun to do so. And the main story can sort of whack-a-mole you from area to area as the enemy tries to hide from you long enough to develop their tech in different areas of these maps throughout the game, sending you back to areas you've already explored, and maybe they develop new buildings or security systems to try and keep you out. Still have Mother Base do exactly what it does now, and suddenly I think the whole game works so much better than it does now. I think if you do this, you also have to limit the amount of drop points on each of these smaller maps, so you kind of have to sneak around to get to the mission you're going to at times. This would force players to engage, while also eliminating a sort of flaw in gameplay, where you could just call a helicopter blasting music right next to an enemy outpost and nobody hears it come in. Hopefully that sort of dissuades some of you from thinking it's just open world bad, because while I think they are too prevalent in games that don't need them, there are ways to use open world elements in ways that improve a game, rather than just make them more boring between the actual good parts. And I think this game is full of good parts. That's why I genuinely just feel like ignoring the open world, the way most people do, makes the game better. The missions and a lot of side ops were really fun. Like, don't let the critique of the open world make you feel like I think this game sucks, because it is entirely possible to ignore it, and the gameplay of the actual missions more than makes up for it. Okay, that pretty much covers the gameplay, so let's talk about the... Once again, I had never played another Metal Gear game, so there were things about the story like certain characters returning from other games, and plot elements that are overarching threads that I had to look up to get up to speed a couple times. But even with that missing context, as a whole, I found the Phantom Pain's story to be immediately gripping, constantly intriguing, and at times incredibly moving. I'm going to be getting into spoilers, so if you haven't played the game, I really urge you to skip forward to this point in the video. I would hate for your first time experiencing any of the Metal Gear series story to come from this stupid little video, rather than firsthand. So yeah, anyway, here's a very general plot synopsis of what happens in Metal Gear Solid 5. Okay, you're Big Boss. You've been in a coma for 9 years. When escaping the hospital, you run into BDSM Ronald McDonald and this guy who's on fire. You're never gonna guess his name. You also survive an assassination attempt by some lady, but she gets lit on fire and falls out a window. Clearly everybody wants you dead. Also, your base has been destroyed, so you, Ocelot, and Kaz need to rebuild. Over the course of doing missions to build your army and base back up, you learn there's this dude named Skullface, and he's doing some messed up shit and might even be building a Metal Gear. You run into that assassin from before again, but this time it seems like she has superpowers. You beat her in a boss fight though because you're sick as hell, and take her back to base to interrogate her. You learn that she breathes through her skin because Kojima likes titties, and she ends up becoming your friend who helps you out along the way. Through doing more missions, you learn that Skullface has been developing a parasite that's designed to kill anyone speaking a particular language because he wants to wipe every language off the face of the earth besides English. So he's basically Hitler too. Needless to say, we gotta stop this guy. So we track down some people who've been working for him and figure out how we can stop him. And in the end, we blow up his big ass Metal Gear and take some aggression out on his Nazi ass. But not so fast, because the game's not over. As it turns out, the whole time you thought you were Big Boss, we were actually an avatar we made of ourselves at the beginning of the game, who had reconstructive surgery to look like Big Boss so the real Big Boss could smoke cigars and look cool in a leather jacket. So canonically, all of us who played Metal Gear Solid 5 are characters in the Metal Gear universe, and it's fucking crazy. But what the hell does any of it mean? Obviously I left a lot out of that synopsis, because to tell you the truth, I just don't think I could cover everything that happens in this game. Like, I didn't even mention Eli, any of the child soldiers, Code Talker, Paz, etc, etc, etc. Instead, I'm way more interested in the overarching themes and ideas Kojima's trying to get us to understand. Well, the really interesting thing to me is I truly think it's up to anyone who plays the game to determine what it means. Not just on some open to interpretation bullshit like any other story, but I mean there really is as much or as little here for you to engage with, or not, depending on, frankly, how much you care about the story and what you expect to get out of it. Now, I know how that sounds, so let me explain. That brief story explanation probably didn't do much for you in terms of making you feel any emotions or question things about your life or the world around you, but it isn't really supposed to. The goal of this game's story is way more interested in making you feel and think than it is to actually tell a cohesive narrative like a book or movie. And if you ask me, that's the power of Kojima, and how he uses the video game medium to tell a story. A lot has been said about how the man writes his games, and how it's all bloated and confusing, and don't get me wrong. Yes, this story is confusing, and I don't think it's perfect by any means. But I can't say it didn't make me feel anything. Me, someone who has no prior connection to these characters, or where the story goes from here, became totally invested in times of being completely lost and confused. Like, I don't understand why Skullface wants to make nukes widely available to anyone on the planet, but it did make me think about the US arming militia groups in the Middle East during the Cold War, and I don't fully understand the reasoning behind why Kaz wanted revenge so badly that he seemed so bitter and angry the whole game, but it did make me think about the US's response to 9/11. I love the way Kojima uses characters as metaphors for concepts, governments, and political ideologies. Can it be ham-fisted at times? Of course, but sometimes that's also the point. I know it's probably silly for someone who literally doesn't know the story of the franchise to play the last game and try to analyze the story, and I bet that previous games in the series have done what I described better, but truthfully the reason I feel compelled to share my feelings about it is because it moved me in a way I wasn't prepared for. When you play Mission 43, and you see your troops who look up to you like a god, salute you and say that it's up to you what you do next, and you have to kill them, you understand why war makes people go a little Joker mode, and be so focused on revenge over doing what's right. You start to think about all the soldiers you thoughtlessly sent out on missions, and died because they looked up to you, and realize, oh shit, maybe I've been the bad guy this whole time. Then, if you're like me, you take a moment to scroll through your sickbay, and to see soldiers on your iDroid, and realize how many of the people in the sickbay are there for PTSD, and how many of them died by suicide. And whoo boy, that hits you right in the anti-war part of your brain. So while this may not have been a perfect story, and Kojima could maybe benefit from being more concise at times, ultimately, the story of Metal Gear Solid 5 accomplishes what it set out to do, which is to strip some of the mystery and legend from the character of Big Boss, and show us that when it comes to war, there are no winners, just scores of ruined lives and lost souls. Now, that got a little heavy because, I mean, this game is pretty heavy, but as a bit of a palate cleanser, I'm going to end the video with a topic that I think is much less important and depressing. So you remember that whole bit in the beginning where I said character design is one of the most important aspects of Metal Gear? Well, there is one character design that led to a lot of controversy before this game even came out, and I want to complain about it a little bit and see what you guys think because maybe I'm wrong. So Quiet's design is just a bikini and combat boots. Again, there is a lore reason why that's the case, but we all know it's just a very thinly veiled excuse to get cheap boob and butt shots during cutscenes. And look, I'm not a prude. I don't mind the odd fanservice-y boob or butt shot, and I think sex and sexuality are good things. We should all be more comfortable with our bodies and express sexuality openly and without fear. However, my issue is that this design isn't cool. You see, the difference between a well-designed female character and one that just treats the character as eye candy, in my opinion, is whether or not they bothered to actually make the character appeal to people who don't find them attractive. Like great, you designed a character for the secret folder on your computer, but the non-porn addicts among us aren't getting anything from Quiet's design. Like, for example, Ada Wong is a character I fall asleep with a body pillow of, but someone who isn't a creepy weirdo could also appreciate the character because she looks cool while doing cool things. Her design is stylish in addition to hot, and if you don't see the difference aside from the amount of clothes they're wearing, imagine if Kojima came up with a lore reason that Snake was wearing a jock strap throughout the entire game, and you could only unlock any sort of like tactical gear for him 40 missions or so into the game. People who find Snake to be an attractive character, other people, definitely not me, would be fine with this change because they get to appreciate his body. But anyone else who just sees him as a badass character would roll their eyes every time they see him because he'd look ridiculous. But then there are characters like Conan the Barbarian and He-Man who are scantily clad, but because people found those characters' designs to be cool in addition to revealing, there was no outcry. To people who don't like the design, the issue is not that there's an attempt to put an almost naked lady in the game. Well, I guess I can't speak for other people, but not to me. My problem is that it's just lazy. Like, it's not even a good reason to make her not wear clothes. Look at all the characters in this game that wear face coverings and masks. They breathe out of their nose and mouths, but they can all have them covered up for various reasons. Like, just take some time to come up with a horny character design that still looks cool and tactical. It's possible, but it's obvious they just chose this design for gooning purposes. Like, I even think it would have been okay if this outfit was what you found her wearing, because she just had to throw together something for herself. But I mean, with all the futuristic things you can develop, none of them could be something tactical, cool, and revealing. I don't know how much of this is on Yoji Shinkawa and how much is Kojima, but just because I admire the guys doesn't mean they're above being criticized for stuff like this. So in conclusion, what we have here is a game with incredibly fun gameplay, an open world with nothing in it, a story that makes no sense while also being incredibly moving and politically relevant, and a character with a design so bad people wrote off this game before it even came out. Is it good? Yeah, I think so. There are aspects of this game I would even call great. In many ways, it's one of my favorites ever, but it also kind of sucks sometimes. And to tell you the truth, I'm kind of okay with that. It's like that one friend that most of the time they're really great to hang out with, but they occasionally say or do something that has you completely questioning your friendship. Are they secretly a bad person, or do they just have flaws? And if so, do they need to change them? Or are having personality quirks just part of being human? Well, most of the time, people should probably work on their flaws and strive to be better people. And you shouldn't let your friends take advantage of you. And also, Metal Gear Solid 5 is just a video game, so it can't really improve itself. So this analogy actually doesn't work. Or is it a good analogy with some flaws? No, it's probably just bad because I'm a terrible writer. And with that, I'm going to end the video there, even though I definitely have more I could say about this game. I just want to actually get a video out rather than spending so long on it I start to hate it and just scrap the idea altogether. Like, I had a Kingdom Come Deliverance video completely finished, but I just, stopped working on it because I started to hate it. I'm not going to make any promises, but I'm coming up on the end of busy season for my work, so hopefully over the summer I can crank out a few more of these videos. Let me know you like this video by liking it and leaving a comment. It really means more than you know. And I love reading your guys' comments. I always learn something from them. I'm sure I got something wrong along the way here, so feel free to correct me in the comments. Just pretty please don't put any spoilers in the comments for the rest of the series. Thank you so much for watching if you're still here, and I will see you in the next video because there will be another one, I promise. Okay, bye.